There is a technique so powerful it has been called forbidden, not because it is dangerous, but because it has been forgotten. Hidden not by others, but buried under the noise of our own minds, this technique does not require strength. It does not demand speed. It requires only one thing: stillness. We live in a world where everything is visible. Screens, alerts, faces, illusions. But what if the most important things are invisible? The truth is, you are not blind but distracted. You are not lost but unfocused. To see beyond the invisible means to awaken an eye that does not look outward but inward, an eye that does not see form but essence, an eye that pierces through illusion and recognizes truth. This inner vision is not a fantasy. It is a skill, a technique, and like all true skills, it must be trained. So what is the forbidden technique? It is simple, but not easy. It is the discipline of silence over noise, breath over reaction, awareness over assumption. It begins with the breath, because the breath is the bridge between the body and the mind. Observe it, and the body calms. Follow it, and the mind settles. Once the mind settles, the fog lifts, and what was hidden becomes clear. Suddenly you begin to see the lies you tell yourself, the emotions that control you, the patterns that trap you, and then you see more: the opportunities you ignored, the strength you denied, the peace that was always there. The invisible was never out there. It was within you, waiting, and now you know the technique. You just have to practice it in silence, in breath, in presence, because when you awaken your inner vision, you no longer need to be told what is true. You see it. The phrase forbidden technique stirs curiosity, mystery, and a sense of danger. But in truth, what is forbidden is not hidden by others. It is hidden from ourselves. It is not sealed behind locked doors or guarded by secret societies. Instead, it is buried beneath layers of distraction, noise, and forgetfulness. We have not been denied access to it. We have simply stopped seeking it. We have turned our gaze outward, mesmerized by the visible world, and in doing so, lost the map to our own inner landscape. This technique is not forbidden because it is harmful. It is forbidden because it contradicts the pace of modern life. In a world obsessed with speed, efficiency, and productivity, a method that calls for stillness, slowness, and silence becomes almost unnatural. The modern mind is conditioned to chase success, information, validation, and so anything that asks it to stop, to listen, and to be feels alien. Not dangerous, but disorienting. That is why it was left behind. We live in an age where external knowledge is valued far above internal wisdom. Schools teach us facts. Institutions test us on formulas. Society measures us by outputs. But almost nowhere are we taught how to observe our thoughts, how to feel without reacting, or how to dwell in silence without anxiety. The forbidden technique is simply the art of turning inward, the art of reclaiming what was once natural but has now become rare, the practice of self-awareness. This inner wisdom is not mystical, it is deeply human. Before language, before society, before belief systems, we had this knowing. A child feels it, an elder remembers it, but somewhere between those 2 points we are trained to ignore it. We are told that real answers come from authority, not from intuition. That truth lies in data, not in experience. That clarity comes from analysis, not from stillness. And so, we exile our inner voice in favor of external noise. Many seek this technique as if it were a magic trick or an esoteric ritual, but the real difficulty lies in its simplicity. It asks nothing more than presence. It demands no tools, no gadgets, no followers. It asks only that we become intimate with our own mind. And that, ironically, is what makes it feel impossible. The average person is more comfortable scrolling through 1,000 images than sitting with one unfiltered thought. More at ease chasing distractions than confronting silence. To remember the technique is to reverse this habit. It is to choose depth over surface, slowness over haste, and perception over performance. It is a return to something we have always known but forgotten how to access. It is like finding an old book on your shelf, one you never noticed before, and realizing it contains the answers you've been searching for elsewhere. The knowledge was not hidden from you. You were simply not ready to see it. There is a reason why ancient traditions valued silence, contemplation, and retreat. They understood that insight does not come from addition, but subtraction, not from acquiring more, but from shedding what is false. The forbidden technique has always been this, the willingness to stop and see what remains when everything else is stripped away. And what remains, if one dares to look deeply, is the one who is looking, the witness, the self behind the self. To practice this technique is not to escape the world, but to see through it. It is not about leaving society behind, but about no longer being enslaved by its illusions. It is not rebellion, it is remembrance, the kind of remembrance that cannot be taught in words, but must be experienced. And though the world may call it forbidden, it is only because it fears what cannot be controlled, and inner vision cannot be controlled. It can only be awakened. When we speak of vision, most think of the eyes, organs of light and form. But there exists another kind of sight, one not limited by the physical. This is inner vision, the perception that arises when the mind grows quiet and the heart becomes attentive. It is the ability to sense what is not spoken, to feel what is not shown, and to understand what is not taught. Inner vision is not about what the eyes detect, it is about what the soul recognizes. This type of perception cannot be reduced to logic or measured with instruments. It moves beneath thought, deeper than intellect. It is the sudden clarity you feel when something feels right without needing proof. It is the silent knowing that a place, a person, or a decision holds meaning, even when the facts say otherwise. This vision is not irrational, it is trans-rational. It includes logic but also surpasses it, tapping into layers of awareness that cannot be explained, only experienced. To activate inner vision is to train ourselves to see through the noise of surface appearances. Much of the world is a mask, curated smiles, polished words, performative gestures. But just beneath that thin layer, there is something more authentic, the truth of a person, the essence of a moment, the deeper pattern hidden in apparent chaos. Inner vision allows us to perceive this hidden reality. It lets us distinguish between image and essence, between what is performed and what is real. When this vision is undeveloped, we are easily fooled. We believe the loudest voice is the wisest. We assume the most successful person is the most fulfilled. We follow the path with the most footprints without asking where it leads. Without inner sight, we become vulnerable to illusion, chasing shadows, trusting appearances, and building our lives on foundations that quietly crumble. But with inner sight, even silence speaks, even stillness teaches, even darkness reveals. This perception is often described as intuition, but that word is too small. Inner vision is not just a feeling. It is a form of direct knowing. It is like an internal compass that aligns us with the truth of a situation, the energy of a person, or the direction of a decision. It does not shout, it whispers, it does not rush, it waits, and for those willing to slow down and listen, it becomes an unfailing guide through uncertainty, complexity, and confusion. There is a profound intelligence in this way of seeing, not the intelligence of information, but the intelligence of insight. It is the wisdom that recognizes patterns before they form, consequences before they arrive. Leaders who possess it move with quiet confidence. Artists who channel it create from beyond the mind, warriors who trusted know when to act and when to wait. It is not a gift reserved for a few. It is available to all who choose to develop it. The reason inner vision remains invisible to many is not because it is rare, but because it is drowned. Drowned in mental chatter, overwhelmed by stimulation, buried under a constant stream of opinions and judgments. Like a mirror obscured by dust, this vision must be cleared through practice, the practice of presence, attention, and reflection. With time, the fog lifts, and we begin to perceive with clarity that which was always there, waiting to be seen. To live with inner vision is to walk through the world with deeper eyes. You no longer merely observe, you perceive. You no longer just look, you understand. You begin to sense the undercurrent in conversations, the mood in a room, the intention behind words. You move from reacting to responding, from assuming to observing, from guessing to knowing. Not because you are special, but because you are awake, and to be awake is to see differently. Stillness is often misunderstood. To many it means doing nothing, the kind of lifeless pause, a void of activity. But true stillness is far from passive. It is not the absence of motion, but the presence of depth. It is not inaction, but intensified awareness. Stillness is the state in which clarity becomes possible, not because the world stops moving, but because you no longer move with every disturbance. In stillness, you do not retreat from life. You meet it more fully. This kind of stillness cannot be imposed from the outside. You can sit cross-legged in a quiet room and still be in complete chaos internally. Thoughts can roar louder than traffic. Emotions can storm heavier than rain. External silence does not guarantee internal quiet. True stillness is something you cultivate from within. It is the ability to remain centered regardless of the storm. It is the eye of the hurricane, motionless, grounded, aware. When you learn to rest in stillness, you begin to see clearly, not because you force clarity, but because it emerges on its own. Just as muddy water becomes transparent when undisturbed, the mind, too, reveals its natural clarity when it is not constantly agitated. In this clarity, problems shrink, patterns reveal themselves, truths that once seemed hidden become obvious. The chaos was never outside, it was in the constant movement of untrained perception. Stillness is not escape. It is not a way to avoid responsibility or numb yourself to reality. It is, in fact, the opposite. It is what allows you to face things as they are, without distortion. Without stillness, we react from habit, conditioned responses, automatic emotions, impulsive decisions. But when you are still, you respond from presence, from choice, from awareness. You no longer move because you are pushed. You move because it is time. In stillness, the inner noise begins to quiet. The constant commentary, the endless analysis, the anxious forecasting, it starts to lose power. You realize you are not your thoughts. You are the one watching them. This shift from identification to observation is the birth of wisdom. You no longer drown in thought. You stand on the shore, watching the waves pass, knowing they are not you. From this position, insight arises without effort. Practicing stillness is not about removing all thought, but about loosening your attachment to it. You let thoughts come and let them go. You stop feeding every story with your attention. You no longer chase every distraction. Stillness creates space, space between thought and reaction, between sensation and response. And in this space you rediscover your freedom. You are no longer a puppet pulled by strings. You are the silent hand holding them. Many people fear stillness because it confronts them with themselves. In the noise, it is easy to hide. In distraction, it is easy to avoid. But when everything becomes quiet, you start to see what's really inside. The fears, the doubts, the pain, but also the wisdom, the strength, the peace. Stillness is the mirror that reflects all of it. It does not lie, it simply reveals, and that is why it is powerful, because only by seeing clearly can we begin to transform. To build stillness is to train the mind like a wild animal, not by force, but with consistency, presence, and respect. You return again and again to the breath, to the body, to this moment, and each time you return, the mind settles a little more. Not because it is conquered, but because it is understood. Eventually, you stop fighting your thoughts. You stop resisting your feelings. You just sit, aware, unmoved. Still, not because the world is calm, but because you are. The breath is the most constant companion you have in this life, yet it is often the most ignored. It begins before your first thought and remains even as your last words fade. You can go without food for days, without sleep for a time, but without breath, life vanishes in minutes. And yet, the breath does not demand attention. It flows quietly, rhythmically, keeping you alive without applause. But for those who choose to notice it, the breath reveals something far deeper than survival. It reveals the path to awareness. Each breath is more than just air. It is the bridge between the visible and invisible, between form and formlessness. It enters the body unseen, and yet it animates every cell. It leaves without a trace, but carries away the weight of the moment. When you focus your attention on the breath, you are not just observing an action, you are touching something sacred, something alive, something ancient that connects all living things. The breath becomes a thread you can follow inward, to the very center of your being. The body exists in the present. It cannot exist in the future or the past. The mind, however, is a traveler, jumping from memory to worry, from thought to distraction. But the breath lives only now. When you bring your mind to the breath, you bring it back home to the body. And when the mind and body reunite, you begin to awaken to what many miss, the moment as it is. The breath becomes the tool that unites the scattered parts of you into one clear presence. In moments of fear, the breath tightens. In times of peace, it expands. The breath is a mirror of the inner world, reflecting what is happening beneath the surface of words and appearances. But it is not just a passive reflection. It is also an instrument of change. By consciously slowing and deepening the breath, you can calm the nervous system, quiet the racing mind, and shift the emotional landscape. In this way, the breath becomes a tool not just for awareness, but for transformation. Ancient traditions understood the power of breath long before science could explain it. They developed entire systems, pranayama, qigong, breath meditations, not to control the breath, but to enter into relationship with it. They saw the breath not merely as oxygen, but as life force, as energy, as spirit, as the unseen river flowing through the temple of the body. When approached with reverence, the breath becomes a teacher. It shows you how to be patient, how to surrender, how to listen. The breath is also the beginning of discipline. Unlike abstract concepts like clarity or presence, the breath is something you can return to again and again. In chaos, in confusion, in daily life, the breath is always available. It is the anchor you can hold onto when the sea becomes rough. It reminds you you are here, you are alive, you are capable of choosing awareness in this very moment. No matter how far you wander, one breath is all it takes to begin again. When you close your eyes and breathe with intention, you begin to notice things you once missed, the texture of air entering the nostrils, the rise and fall of your chest, the subtle pause between inhale and exhale. In that pause, there is no thought, no effort, just presence. And in that presence, something ancient awakens, a quiet intelligence, a deep peace, a silent witness. This is the spirit, not in a religious sense, but as the essence of who you truly are beyond name, role, and story. To honor the breath is to honor life itself. It is to recognize that the breath is not separate from the body, mind, or spirit. It is the thread that weaves them together. When your breath is shallow, your awareness is shallow. When your breath is deep, your perception deepens. Through the breath, you do not just observe life, you enter it fully. It is the doorway through which you pass from sleep to awakening, from distraction to attention, from reaction to presence. The eyes can look, but it is attention that truly sees. Yet not all attention is the same. Most people look through filters of desire, fear, bias, and memory. They see not what is, but what their mind has been trained to expect. This is not vision, it is projection. To see beyond the invisible, you must untrain your perception. You must strip it of assumptions and approach the moment with the innocence of a beginner. Only then does the invisible begin to reveal itself. Observation is simple, but not easy. The moment we observe something, the mind often rushes to label it. Good, bad, right, wrong, useful, useless. This judgment kills true seeing. It places the observer above what is observed, turning life into a hierarchy of preference, rather than a field of discovery. But when you drop judgment, you begin to see things not as you want them to be, but as they are. And in that honesty, clarity emerges. The invisible becomes visible not through effort, but through openness. Pure observation is an act of humility. It means admitting that you do not already know. It means being willing to let the world teach you, rather than trying to impose your interpretation on it. When you watch a leaf fall without deciding whether it's beautiful or meaningless, you begin to see its essence. When you listen to someone speak without preparing your response, you begin to hear what they are actually saying, and more than that, what they are not saying. There is a silent language beneath words, beneath form. This is the realm of the invisible, not supernatural, but subtle. Most miss it because they are moving too fast or looking too narrowly. But when your attention becomes soft, receptive, and still, this subtle realm begins to whisper. You start to notice small shifts in energy, quiet patterns of behavior, unspoken emotions, and hidden truths. This is not magic, it is awareness, and it lives on the other side of judgment. Imagine watching the breath without labeling it as good or bad, just feeling its rhythm. Or watching a passing thought without getting entangled in its story, simply acknowledging its presence like a cloud in the sky. This kind of observation transforms your relationship with reality. You stop fighting it, you stop editing it. You start witnessing it, and through that witnessing, the noise fades, the fog clears, and what once seemed invisible becomes quietly obvious. The more you practice pure observation, the more you realize how much you've been missing. In the hurried search for meaning, you've often overlooked the moment itself. You've overlooked the way light moves across a wall, the micro expressions on a person's face, the subtle tension in your own shoulders. These are not trivial details, they are messages, each one a thread connected to deeper truths, but only visible to a mind that has learned to watch without interference. This kind of attention is also the beginning of compassion. When you observe without judgment, you stop labeling others as enemies or allies. You begin to see their wounds, their conditioning, their humanity. You begin to understand that everyone is carrying something invisible. This seeing does not excuse behavior, but it deepens your understanding. And understanding opens the door to wisdom, not the kind that comes from books, but from being fully present with life as it is. To see beyond the invisible is not a skill you master once. It is a practice, a return, a way of moving through the world with eyes that are not clouded by fear or hunger. It is the ability to sit in silence and notice what you usually miss. It is the courage to witness without needing to fix. It is not grand or dramatic, but it is powerful. For once you begin to observe purely, life itself begins to reveal its secrets, not through answers, but through presence. The greatest obstruction to inner vision is not darkness, it is noise. Not the kind made by the outer world, but the kind generated within. The constant stream of thoughts, worries, judgments, and imagined conversations that flood the mind like static. This mental chatter becomes so constant, so familiar, that most people don't even notice it anymore. It becomes the background hum of their entire life, but just because something is constant doesn't mean it is clear. In fact, the more persistent it is, the more it distorts what's real. Mental noise is a veil. It hangs between you and the present moment, between you and direct experience. It filters what you see, colors what you feel, and shapes how you react, often without your awareness. You think you're responding to reality, but you're actually responding to your thoughts about reality. In this way, the noise creates a layer of illusion. To pierce this veil, you must first become aware that it exists and that it is not you. You are the awareness behind the noise, not the noise itself. The mind, when left untrained, is like a radio stuck between stations, never fully clear, never fully still. It jumps from regret to anticipation, from self-criticism to fantasy. This is not evil. It's not even unnatural. It's simply untamed. The problem is not that the mind produces thoughts, it always will. The problem is that you believe every thought. You attach to them, argue with them, follow them down endless corridors, and build your identity around them. And in doing so, you lose your clarity. Recognizing mental noise is the first step. Releasing it is the next. But release does not mean suppression. You do not silence the mind by force. You silence it by attention. Not aggressive, narrow attention, but gentle, spacious attention. When you observe thoughts without judgment or engagement, they begin to lose their power. They arise, but they no longer hook you. You don't fight them. You watch them. And in that watching, they begin to dissolve like mist in morning light. Most people live as though they are being chased by their own mind. But you are not the victim of your thoughts. You are their witness. And when you return again and again to this witnessing through stillness, through breath, through presence, the noise begins to thin. It becomes quieter, less intrusive, and as the veil lifts, something remarkable begins to happen. You start to see life as it is, not as your mind narrates it. This clarity is not sterile. It is alive. It doesn't mean you stop thinking altogether. It means thought takes its proper place as a tool, not a master. You can still plan, reflect, imagine, but you do it consciously without being consumed. You begin to experience what it means to have a quiet mind and a sharp awareness. You no longer think in order to avoid silence. You become comfortable in silence, and you think from within it, not in place of it. There is also a kind of listening that emerges as the noise dies down. You start to hear things differently, not just words, but the spaces between them. You sense the weight behind someone's silence, the energy beneath someone's posture. You begin to notice the unspoken, the intuitive, the invisible layers of communication. This is only possible when your own mind is no longer drowning out the moment with commentary. Stillness reveals. Noise conceals. Letting go of mental noise is not a one-time act, but a continual practice. It is a returning, again and again, to that quiet space behind the mind. Some days it feels natural. Other days it feels impossible. But over time, the process changes you. You no longer seek silence as an escape. You carry it within you, even amidst movement. And from this place, your inner vision becomes more than a concept. It becomes your way of seeing. The body is often misunderstood. In many spiritual traditions, it has been treated as something to transcend, ignore, or even reject, a prison for the soul. a distraction from higher truth. But this view is incomplete. The body is not the obstacle, it is the vessel, it is not a cage, it is a gateway. When fully awakened, the body becomes a finely tuned instrument of perception, capable of sensing energies, emotions, and subtle realities that the thinking mind cannot grasp. Most people live in their heads, dragging their bodies behind them like silent servants. They move, eat, sleep, and speak without ever truly inhabiting the body. But the body is always communicating, not just in pain or pleasure, but in sensation, temperature, breath, posture, and vibration. It is a field of intelligence, rich with signals, always present, always here. To awaken inner vision, you must begin to listen to this body, not as a machine, but as a living, breathing awareness. Think of how the body reacts even before the mind understands. The tightening of your chest when someone is being dishonest. The shiver down your spine before a moment of danger. The warmth in your belly when something resonates as true. These are not coincidences. They are evidence that the body knows. It perceives on a level deeper than language. But you must slow down to sense it. You must learn to read the language of sensation and subtle movement. When you cultivate awareness of the body, you begin to expand your range of perception, not just through the five senses, but through what lies beneath them. You become more sensitive to your own presence, more attuned to the energy of others, more grounded in the reality of each moment. This is not imagination, it is embodiment. It is not about chasing mystical experiences, but about becoming radically intimate with your own physicality, not as separate from spirit, but as its expression. Practices such as mindful walking, conscious movement, standing meditation, and breath, body synchronization are not merely exercises, they are initiations. They reintroduce you to a kind of knowing that does not speak in words, a knowing that is felt in the weight of your feet on the earth, the angle of your spine, the openness of your chest, the rhythm of your step. This way of knowing does not explain life, it experiences it directly without needing explanation. The awakened body is not tense, it is not rigid, it is not driven by performance or appearance, it is relaxed but alert. Open but grounded, soft but strong, this balance of yielding and presence is what allows energy to move freely. In this state, perception sharpens. You begin to notice what once slipped past you, the slight change in the wind, the subtle disharmony in a room, the intuitive pull toward or away from a decision. The body becomes a compass, pointing you toward what the eyes cannot see. What many call gut feeling or intuition often arises through the body. But to access it, you must remove the dullness that numbness creates. When you are always tense, distracted, or disconnected, you cannot feel these whispers. The body becomes like a dusty instrument, its strings too tight or too loose to produce harmony. But when you clean it, tune it, play it with attention and care, it begins to sing. It becomes a source of deep clarity, not separate from the mind, but integrated with it. To awaken the body is to reclaim your full perceptual power. Not to glorify flesh or become obsessed with sensation, but to realize that awareness does not float above the body, it moves through it. It sees through the eyes, hears through the ears, and touches the world through the skin. And yet it goes beyond these. With practice, the body becomes a sensitive antenna, receiving signals from both the seen and unseen. This is not fantasy. This is refined perception, rooted in presence, grounded in truth. In a world obsessed with accumulation, it's natural to believe that the path to inner vision means adding more techniques, more insights, more mystical experiences. But true inner vision does not come from addition, it comes from depth. It is not about how many things you can perceive, but how fully you can enter what is already before you. It's the difference between glancing at a lake and diving into its waters. The surface might look calm or ordinary, but below it lies an entire universe waiting to be seen. Many chase visions of light, colors, forms, even otherworldly symbols, but these are only expressions. What matters more is the quality of your seeing. When you look at a tree, do you see only bark and leaves? Or do you sense the stillness that has been rooted in the earth for decades? When you listen to someone speak, do you only hear their words? Or do you perceive the emotion behind them, the silence between the sentences? Inner vision is not separate from ordinary life. It is the depth with which you meet it. This depth does not come from effort. It arises from presence, and presence requires stillness. A still mind sees clearly, just as still water reflects the moon, but a disturbed mind sees only distortion. To see with depth, you must become quiet enough to let things reveal themselves to you. You don't dig for truth. You receive it the way a valley receives rain, open, patient, humble. In this openness, what is hidden begins to emerge, not dramatically, but intimately. Seeing with depth also means seeing yourself without flinching. It's easy to seek insight about the world, but harder to turn that vision inward. Depth begins within. It means observing your own fears, desires, patterns, and projections, not to judge them, but to understand. Only when you see yourself clearly can you begin to see others without distortion. Your vision is only as deep as your self-honesty, and the more you embrace this inner seeing, the more the outer world begins to take on new shape. Depth also reveals itself in the smallest details. A cracked teacup, a sudden silence in conversation, the way someone's eyes shift when they speak. These are not trivial. They are portals, openings into deeper truths, if you are still enough to notice. This kind of vision requires sensitivity, not in the sense of fragility, but in the sense of awakened perception. You stop moving through life on the surface and instead begin to rest within its hidden layers, and through this the invisible becomes natural. What we call insight is not always sudden or grand. It often arrives as a quiet recognition, a subtle realignment within your awareness, like a lens slowly coming into focus. One day, you see a familiar person and feel something new, a compassion instead of resistance. Or you revisit a memory and find healing instead of pain. These are signs of depth. Not that your vision has widened, but that it has deepened, reaching into places that were once too dark or distant to face. Depth is not loud. It does not shout for attention. In fact, most of it happens in silence, the silence that follows a difficult truth, the silence that surrounds a sudden knowing, the silence that reveals what was always present but unnoticed. This silence is not emptiness. It is the ground in which depth takes root. To live in that silence is not to be detached. It is to be deeply involved, but without clinging, without rushing, without needing to control the outcome. In the end, seeing with depth is an invitation not to change what you see, but to change how you see. The world does not become more magical. It has always been magical. What changes is your ability to perceive it, not through the frantic collecting of new visions, but through the quiet art of presence. Depth is not added, it is uncovered through stillness, honesty, and the courage to stay with what is real. So now the question is no longer, what can you see? The question becomes, how deeply are you willing to look? Not with your eyes, but with your being, not chasing after visions, but standing still long enough to let the truth rise to meet you. You do not need more, you do not need to go elsewhere. The invisible is not hidden, it is only quiet. And quiet things are only revealed to quiet minds. What was once forbidden is not out of reach. It has only been waiting for your attention, for your sincerity, and for the stillness within you to finally return. And when it does, you won't just see beyond the invisible. You will begin to see through it until nothing remains but clarity,